Oh, what a touching conversation. I was planning to just listen today, but in case Alan did something like that, I did prepare a few things to say. So Rashi has come up a lot, Rashi Fine, and I thought I'd tell you a couple of stories about him so that he isn't just a picture for those of you who didn't know him. Rashi loved his metaphors and his stories. Here's one he told, and I don't think it made it into his book, but it turned out Rashi, as Alan said, was very involved in crafting Medicare. And shortly after Medicare was passed by Congress, Lyndon Johnson invited 8 of the architects of Medicare to come into the White House and have a little conversation with him. This was the first time Rashi had met Johnson. He was all excited. And as he tells the story, he stayed up all night trying to think of something he could say so the president would remember him. This was his big opportunity. And so the 8 circle around Lyndon Johnson, and he comes in and he says, Rashi first. And he says, oh, Rashi, Rashi says, I'm Rashi Fine. And he said, oh, Rashi, I'm so glad to meet you, and pumps his hand, looks him in the eye, and Rashi comes out with the quip, and Lyndon laughs, and he pats him on the shoulder, and Rashi thinks, nailed it. And LBJ goes all the way around the room, and then comes back to Rashi, and puts out his hand, and waits to be introduced. And from which Rashi drew the conclusion, it's the policy you craft, not the fame you get. I have one more, as long as we're on Rashi Fine stories. He had another one. His grandfather used to say, or his great-grandfather used to say, today it's the czar, and below the czar are the soldiers, and below the soldiers are the nobles, and below the nobles are the rich, and down in the bottom are the people. But come the revolution, it'll be the other way around, with the people on top and the czar under the ground. And then Rashi would always say, every time something went wrong, but it's really hard to hold your hand this way for long. And eventually, it goes like this. It's just a Rashi story. Take it as a metaphor for whatever you want to take it as a metaphor for. Just a couple more memories. We haven't talked about the Yale site. And I know we have at least one scholar, several from the Yale site. So let's remember Ted Marmor. He's come up a couple of times. For those of you who don't know Ted, I think maybe one story will capture him in a nutshell. A bunch of us were at a conference in France. Quite a few scholars were there, one of the 4-country conferences. We went to walk to dinner and got totally lost. This was in Rennes. And it was raining. And we came out of the restaurant. Wine had entered into this. So we were having a hard time figuring out how to get home. So I'm trying to pull out a map in the rain. Not Ted. Ted walks into the middle of a busy street. I got to show you. Puts his hand up like this. Cars stop. And he picks one car. And he goes up, knocks on the window. And this young man rolls the window down. It's one of these tiny little French cars. And he says, Ted doesn't speak French, but he speaks English with a French accent when he's in France. So he says, excuse me. And the guy's looking at him. The guy is there, speaks perfectly good English, and after a while and Ted says, we're lost and we're looking for this hotel. And the guy starts to give instructions. And Ted looks at us and goes, come on, get in. And we get into the car, and Ted gets into the front seat, and they start to chat. And the guy's like, and Ted says, come on, and then starts giving the guy instructions. Like, no, go this way. We're lost. And Ted's still giving instructions. But to his credit, after this was all done, we all get into the hotel, and Ted's still talking to the guy. What's he doing? He's inviting him to come to Yale. He doesn't know where the money will come from, probably from Colby. But on the one hand, outrageous. On the other hand, incredibly generous. And if you knew Ted, you knew that fabulous combination would probably still be walking around in the rain, if not for his bold action. I want to echo something that Alan just said, and that is how hard David and Laurie worked. Where was Laurie? Just to make this program and keep it running. We just take for granted that the foundation is this great thing that supports us. But it was at 86 million, Laurie, that you said. One thing that happened behind the scenes all the time was these two championing the program. And I think it's been said today, but it's sort of a little known fact how hard they pushed and fought and negotiated and smiled and managed to keep the foundation interested in this program. We know it's a fabulous program, but it takes a lot of really adroit conversation to make a foundation commit for that long. So let me just echo that thanks. I don't know if we should say more about Mark and Alan. How can you say enough? Alan, every year, I've watched this now for more years than we care to remember, but every year he ups his game. Most of us want to go home and sort of sip a martini, but no, every year the program gets just a little better. I'm sorry for those first-year cohort people, but the implication here, but it was good at the start, and you just see it get better. And Mark, one last thing to say. One year our flights all got canceled, and so we hung around here an extra night. And I'll only say about that night, there are two kinds of scholars: those who have seen Mark dancing and those who haven't. One last word, and that's about the NAC. The NAC has just been, it's been such a pleasure to serve with the NAC. But the reason it's such a pleasure and so much fun to serve on the NAC is you, the scholars. We have the incredible privilege to read your work, to read your articles, to sit there and have these wonderful conversations about this person's great, and watch the site directors, our wonderful site directors wrestle. No, we really want this person. And then watch year in and year out as you produce this magnificent work. It's been my huge pleasure to write many letters, many silent letters behind the scenes on your behalf. And it's a pleasure, really a pleasure, just because the work has been so consistently good. This point has been made, and I don't want to end by simply flattering you. Yes, I do. I will end by simply flattering you and to say what a pleasure it's been to watch you all, to listen to you all, to cheer you all as you've had these magnificent careers. Thank you for letting me be a part of this.